What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out the new Motorola One 5G Ace. Now, if the naming scheme with these phones seems super confusing, well, that's because it is. This device is essentially the US version of the Moto G 5G, and the most important thing to know about this phone is it's now Motorola's cheapest 5G capable device for here in the US. It retails for $399 unlocked. It'll probably be hitting some carrier networks soon, which means that price could come down a little bit still. And for Motorola fans looking to upgrade, and perhaps for folks looking to get started with 5G without having to pay flagship prices, this device probably seems pretty enticing. There are quite a few things to consider with this phone though, and I'm gonna go over all of that in this video, of course. But first things first, let's go ahead and unbox this thing and see what all comes inside the package when you buy it. So sliding off the lid, the first thing we get is the phone itself. The Ace comes in one color, this shiny silver finish, and unlocked at least one configuration option. So what you see is what you get here. Digging a little deeper, the package also includes a stack of paperwork and instructions along with a SIM removal tool if you need it. And underneath that stuff, just two included accessories, a 15-watt USB-A wall plug and a USB-A to USB-C charging cable. Pretty standard stuff that we've seen on all the other Motorola phones so far this year. With all that stuff out of the way, here is the Ace once again. And right off the bat, I think there are quite a few things you can pick out about this phone just by glancing at it. If it wasn't totally obvious, this is a big phone, 6.7 inches with that tall 20:9 aspect ratio. Nowadays, it's certainly at the upper end of screen size, basically rivals the biggest phones on the market. And while it is a lot to hold and manage in the hand, I do think getting all that real estate to view your content is pretty nice. Across the front, you get a very familiar design. There's a center hole punch camera cutout that to me looks to maybe be a little bigger than average, but not a big deal. There's minimal bezels all around, a super subtle bottom chin, just a little wider than the sides, but greater than an 85% screen to body ratio, which is pretty solid. Unlike some other big phones like the Stylo 6 or A21 for example, you don't get a whole lot of bulk or wasted space. From the front at least, it certainly looks like your average 2020 or 2021 Motorola phone, but around back they definitely added quite a bit of flair to make this phone stand out. This shiny silver finish produces quite the rainbow effect in the right light, and overall I think this is probably a love it or hate it kind of design. I think it's unique to say the least, though while the housing might imitate a shimmering metal material, it is still all plastic, as you might expect from a mid-range Moto device. If you look a little closer, you can see a subtle crisscross pattern covering the back as well. Kind of looks like a steel plate in a way. The sides are a matte silver, and the frame to me feels like a sturdy metal. All in all, while the shimmer and shine might not be everyone's favorite, I do kind of like it. It's visually very interesting, at least. And holding the phone, nothing to me feels particularly cheap. It's also water repellent. That's how Motorola explains it, at least. So it should survive at least a little bit of accidental spillage. With that being said though, because this device is sort of a region-specific re-release of a phone that already came out in the fall of 2020, it has some other physical aspects and design cues that sort of reveal its age. So taking a closer look at everything else, on the left side, you've got the SIM and SD card tray in its usual spot. On the right, there's the familiar volume buttons and power button, but you'll notice, unlike some other new 2021 Motorola phones like the Stylus and the Power, this 5G Ace doesn't get the refreshed fingerprint side button combo setup. It still has the famous Motorola logo dimple and rear fingerprint sensor around back. So kind of a strange inconsistency compared to the other new 2021 Motorola devices. Down below, there's a headphone jack, USB-C port, and downward firing speaker, and the speaker setup actually is on par with the rest of Motorola's 2021 devices, and that's to say it is a single speaker setup. No stereo sound on this phone. The earpiece does not double as a secondary speaker like previous Motorola phones have had, and to me that's a huge bummer, especially on a phone at this price point. I'm not sure why Motorola has has just dropped stereo speakers on literally every new phone this year, but it's just not a great move. Here's a quick sound sample so you can get an idea. Also around back is a triple lens camera setup and flash, which I'll go more in depth with in a bit. But first, let me just quickly go over the rest of the specs. With the display, the 5G Ace gets a Full HD 2400 by 1080 resolution, LTPS, IPS, LCD panel, a lot of letters there, and packs in around 393 pixels per inch. Now, unlike some other international and high-end 5G Motorola phones, this device does not get any high refresh rate display. And considering the competition now for 2021, that might seem like a miss. But to be honest, I'm not so sure the average consumer who this phone is targeted towards is going to care about that just yet. What you do get though is still a really solid viewing experience in general. I think it's a bright, bold looking screen for being LCD anyway. The resolution is right for a screen this size. It's obviously really nice to be able to watch content on this thing. Like I said earlier, 6.7 inches is just a massive display. And I think for most people, this is a fine looking screen. Yes, there are other better options out there. Samsung's A series and the Pixel 4a 5G with OLED, for example. But all in all, I don't have too many real complaints. Motorola just has never really been one to push the boundaries or exceed expectations with their screen technology. Now, inside the 5G Ace, I think there's really three important things to consider. First off, powering this phone is a fairly large 5,000 milliamp battery, and that's likely going to be good enough for a day and a half of use on a single charge, maybe even more than that if you're kind of a light user. It's actually the same size battery as the Moto G Power, and that phone was named because of its big battery. So what you get here is as good as that, and power users I think are really going to appreciate the longevity. The downside is 15 watt max charging speeds, and nowadays that's pretty slow, especially for a big battery like this. You also don't get wireless charging either, but I can probably look past those things just considering that this phone won't spend too much time plugged in anyway. In regards to the specs, this phone gets the mid-range Snapdragon 750G chipset and Adreno 619 GPU, 6 gigabytes of RAM, and 128 gigabytes of internal storage. And that to me is really solid for a phone at this price point. I don't have any complaints. One thing worth noting though is that some future carrier versions of this phone might be configured with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage, which suddenly is kind of an issue for the price, I think. So if you can, I'd probably just stick to this fully unlocked configuration with the higher specs, unless those other carrier phones are offered at a really good deal. Now, while I don't necessarily have any issues with the internals, I do have a couple of issues with Motorola's software situation. This phone still ships with Android 10, and I could maybe look past that if this was $150 or $200 Moto device even, but a $400 5G capable smartphone in 2021 shouldn't be this many months behind on updates. On the bright side, I don't think this phone performs badly at all. Out of the box, it's fast, fluid, and Motorola's Android UI is unique, obviously, but I think it's still really good. But again, with every good, there's a bad. Motorola promises just one full software update for this device. So assuming it does get Android 11 eventually, that'll likely be it. Again, I just kind of have an issue with a phone like this, being priced the way it is, being positioned in the 5G space early on, but having very budget-like limitations. And to me, it's stuff like this that probably holds this phone back from being a competitive device for more tech-savvy consumers. The everyday buyer might not notice these things, but a little bit of due diligence, I think does reveal some issues here. And if you were keeping track, the third important thing to consider is actually the 5G capability with this phone. So 5G is kind of a loose term on the 5G Ace. You'll get LTE and sub 6 gigahertz connectivity, which I think is more or less expected on a phone at this price point. But at the moment, the unlocked version of this device seems to only get 5G on T-Mobile and its subsidiaries, kind of like the OnePlus Nord N10 5G. It looks like sometime soon Motorola will have a 5G Ace for Verizon and AT&T. But for now, just understand that the 5G branded to this phone is limited, to say the least. So finally, with all those cameras around back, there's actually not a lot to talk about here because the setup has sort of been used and reused in a lot of other Moto devices already. The main lens is that 48 megapixel shooter. There's a secondary 8 megapixel 118 degree ultra wide lens and a 2 megapixel macro lens for up close photography. Up front, there's also a 16 megapixel selfie camera. Again, nothing too surprising. Now, you guys know the camera app itself has gone through some changes, but the features and functionality on this phone are about what you'd expect. Night vision, along with Motorola's own unique filters, are all present. You can shoot up to 4K video with the rear lens. And to me, with just a quick test sample out of the box, the results look pretty decent. I think the selfie camera produces a super accurate shot. Colors look really good, detail is there. There's no glaring issues. The rear lens setup is a little more saturated. I think I look probably more orange than I would have liked, but still pretty decent, all things considered. The tough part really is just that while there doesn't seem to be anything wrong or even lacking with the camera capabilities on the 5G Ace, having it in the same price bracket as the Pixel 4a 5G, for example, is just tough to compare. So all in all, while this phone is sort of old news for the rest of the world, here in the US market, I think the Motorola One 5G Ace offers a few things to like for the everyday consumer. It's a big device with a long-lasting battery, decent mid-range specs, a solid camera setup. I think the 5G branding is maybe a little misleading, and there are certain elements that will make the more tech-focused buyer turn away from this phone. But for the price, I think there's some potential here. What do you guys think about this phone? Is it something you'd be interested in? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.